In recent months, a growing movement in China has captured global attention as young Chinese citizens begin to rise up against the Chinese Communist Party's long-standing rule. What started as isolated protests has quickly turned into a wave of defiance, with students, workers, and even everyday citizens taking to the streets to express their frustrations. For years, the CCP has maintained strict control over nearly every aspect of life. But now, the younger generation is challenging this power, demanding greater freedoms, social reforms, and a more open society. Watch the video until the end and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. This unprecedented pushback raises important questions. What is driving the youth of China to stand against a regime that has been known for its tight control? Is it the rapid expansion of social media and information that has led them to see the world differently? Or is it a deeper sense of dissatisfaction with economic inequality, corruption, and government policies that seem out of touch with the needs of the younger generation? As tensions continue to escalate, the world watches closely to see if this will lead to significant political change or if the CCP will succeed in quashing this movement. Watch the video until the end and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. In this video, we will explore the factors behind this uprising, look at the risks and challenges young Chinese face in challenging one of the most powerful regimes in the world, and analyze what this could mean for China's future. Will the youth's cries for reform lead to a political revolution, or is this just a fleeting moment of resistance? Stay tuned as we uncover the shocking truth behind the growing mutiny in China. Watch the video until the end and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. In recent months, a growing movement in China has captured global attention as young Chinese citizens begin to rise up against the Chinese Communist Party's long-standing rule. What started as isolated protests has quickly turned into a wave of defiance, with students, workers, and even everyday citizens taking to the streets to express their frustrations. For years, the CCP has maintained strict control over nearly every aspect of life. But now, the younger generation is challenging this power, demanding greater freedoms, social reforms, and a more open society. Watch the video until the end and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. This unprecedented pushback raises important questions. What is driving the youth of China to stand against a regime that has been known for its tight control? Is it the rapid expansion of social media and information that has led them to see the world differently? Or is it a deeper sense of dissatisfaction with economic inequality, corruption, and government policies that seem out of touch with the needs of the younger generation? As tensions continue to escalate, the world watches closely to see if this will lead to significant political change or if the CCP will succeed in quashing this movement. Watch the video until the end and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. In this video, we will explore the factors behind this uprising, look at the risks and challenges young Chinese face in challenging one of the most powerful regimes in the world, and analyze what this could mean for China's future. Will the youth's cries for reform lead to a political revolution, or is this just a fleeting moment of resistance? Stay tuned as we uncover the shocking truth behind the growing mutiny in China. Watch the video until the end and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. The Chinese government has been suspending the publication of the youth unemployment rate, a typical approach to avoid revealing the full extent of the problem. This has left most young Chinese with little choice but to continue working within the grueling 996 work culture, working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. The competition for jobs is intensifying, with Chinese universities producing an increasing number of graduates each year. In 2021, 9 million fresh graduates enter the workforce, and by 2024, this number is expected to rise to 11.8 million. The already fierce competition will only worsen, and with it, youth unemployment, which has already surpassed 20%. This situation is further complicated by the rise of movements like Ban, Let It Rot, where young people are refusing to participate in the rat race. But it's not just the movement itself, there simply aren't enough jobs available to meet the demand. The growing mismatch between job supply and demand has led to an increasingly grim outlook for the youth. According to economists, nearly half of China's youth may soon be jobless, including those who have willingly adopted the lying flat philosophy. As the job market tightens, even fresh graduates are resorting to bizarre and unconventional employment. For instance, some are becoming full-time children, staying at home with their parents, helping with chores, and receiving a salary in return. This new form of escapism highlights the severe disillusionment among China's youth. The root of this frustration lies in the systemic pressures imposed by Chinese society. A key societal expectation for the youth is Chonglu, which means to establish a family and career, which often includes buying a home. However, the cost of housing has skyrocketed, with prices in cities like Shanghai and Beijing reaching levels almost 12 times higher than the average income. This makes it nearly impossible for most young people to afford property, leading many to reject societal expectations altogether. These challenges, including the failure of the real estate sector and the decline of the private tutoring industry, have had a massive impact on youth morale. The CCP's crackdown on various sectors has destroyed millions of jobs and wiped out entire industries, leaving young people with few options for advancement. As the youth unemployment rate rises, so does the discontent. China's labor productivity growth has significantly decreased, from an average of 7% per year to just 4% after 2021. Consumer confidence has dropped, retail sales have fallen, and the overall economic outlook is bleak. This decline in domestic consumption is particularly alarming because China's largest state-owned enterprises rely heavily on domestic sales, which now face significant challenges. Despite China's impressive rise in global rankings, such as the number of companies on the Fortune 500 list, the country is now experiencing an economic slowdown, and it's even facing deflation. Consumer prices fell for the first time in over 2 years, signaling a lack of demand within the economy. This decline in demand is leading to less production, job cuts, and even more youth dissatisfaction. However, there's a deeper, more troubling issue looming: China's demographic crisis. China's population is aging rapidly, with over 280 million people over the age of 60, making it home to the largest elderly population in the world. This is the result of the one-child policy, which was implemented in 1980 to curb population growth. While it succeeded in reducing the population, it also led to a demographic imbalance, with far more men than women, which has caused social and cultural issues. The aging population combined with a shrinking workforce means that China will soon face a severe labor shortage. By 2035, China is projected to have 400 million people over the age of 60, nearly 30% of its population. This is a ticking time bomb for the economy, as fewer young workers will be available to replace retiring individuals. This will strain the economy and exacerbate the already pressing challenges of unemployment and societal pressures. In summary, China is facing a multifaceted crisis. The youth are caught between overwhelming societal expectations, a lack of job opportunities, and an increasingly difficult economic landscape. The CCP's policies and attempts to suppress dissent only seem to worsen the situation, creating a vicious cycle that may take years to resolve. The challenges faced by China's youth are deeply interconnected with the country's economic and demographic issues. For many young people in China, the future looks bleak due to high unemployment rates and limited job opportunities. Youth unemployment, especially among those aged 16 to 24, has surged to 21.3%, with more than 1 in 5 young people jobless. This grim situation is compounded by a fierce competition for a shrinking number of jobs. Fresh graduates, who number in the millions each year, are finding it increasingly difficult to secure full-time positions. As a result, many have resorted to part-time jobs or even become full-time children, relying on their parents for financial support. This problem is partly the result of China's 996 work culture, where long working hours are the norm, and the government's crackdown on industries like private tutoring has only worsened the situation. Many young people are disillusioned with the system, and this dissatisfaction has led to the rise of movements like Tangping Lying Flat, which advocates for disengagement from the pressure to overwork, and Ban, a more extreme form of apathy. These movements are seen as coping mechanisms for the frustration caused by lack of opportunity and economic instability. One of the most significant underlying causes of this crisis is China's demographic decline. The one-child policy, which was implemented to control the country's population growth, has led to a rapidly aging population. With fewer young people entering the workforce, China's economic growth is stunted, as seen in the drop in labor productivity and consumer spending. As the aging population grows, the workforce shrinks, leading to fewer workers contributing to the economy and an increasing burden on social services for the elderly. This demographic shift is particularly alarming because it not only threatens economic stability but also puts a strain on the labor force, further exacerbating youth unemployment. The government has attempted to address this by ending the one-child policy and encouraging families to have more children. However, these efforts have largely failed, as the fertility rate remains below the replacement level. The high cost of living and education, coupled with a lack of confidence in the future, has deterred many from having larger families. The situation is further complicated by China's strained relationship with global powers. particularly the United States. Discontent among the youth has led some to seek help from external sources, including the CIA, with claims that American intelligence agencies have recruited young Chinese people dissatisfied with Xi Jinping's leadership. These recruits, often highly educated but disillusioned by their lack of prospects, are turning to the CIA for support, as they see no way out under the current regime. This growing disillusionment among China's youth is not just about unemployment. It reflects a broader sense of hopelessness, as many young people feel trapped in a system that offers little opportunity for advancement. Despite the government's attempts to control the narrative and suppress dissent, the reality on the ground is clear. China's youth are increasingly discontented, and this dissatisfaction could have long-term consequences for the country's stability and growth. In conclusion, the combination of high youth unemployment, demographic challenges, economic stagnation, and social unrest paints a grim picture for China's future. The government's failure to address these issues could lead to further economic decline and social instability, with far-reaching effects on both the domestic and global economy. Xi Jinping's leadership in China has faced increasing criticism, particularly from the younger generation, due to a series of policies that have negatively impacted the economy and the job market. One of the most significant blows came from the government's crackdown on private tutoring, a sector that was once worth $100 billion. As a result, stock prices of listed tutoring companies plummeted by over 90%, and more than 200,000 layoffs were reported. This decision contributed to rising youth unemployment, especially for college graduates who relied on the education sector for job opportunities. The education sector accounted for 17% of employment for recent graduates, making this policy particularly damaging. Many young people blamed Xi for not fully considering the consequences of such sweeping changes. This was not the only sector affected. Xi's administration also imposed harsh policies on other lucrative industries, such as tech and real estate, to curb the power of wealthy individuals and promote common prosperity. While the intention was to redistribute wealth, the negative economic impact resulted in massive job losses. In the tech sector alone, major companies like Alibaba and Tencent were forced to reduce their workforces by 15%, with millions of tech employees losing their jobs in 2022. These layoffs hit young graduates particularly hard, as many were hoping to start their careers in the tech industry. The accumulated effects of these policies led to a loss of confidence among the youth. Unemployment was high, wages had stagnated, and many young people faced pay cuts or had to rely on low-paying jobs. In cities like Shanghai, even those who were lucky enough to keep their jobs had to make ends meet with meager salaries. The economic conditions worsened due to the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, which further exacerbated the situation. With little to no opportunity for career advancement, many young people were forced to cut down on their spending, and some even resorted to extreme measures to survive. Xi's leadership, characterized by a dictatorial style, also alienated the youth. His strict zero-COVID policy, which restricted movement and imposed harsh quarantine measures, fueled further frustration. Protests erupted in major cities like Shanghai, with youth demanding an end to lockdowns and greater freedoms. However, the government's heavy-handed response to these protests, including the surveillance and detention of those who voiced dissent, made Xi appear out of touch with the public. Xi's policies also extended to higher education, where his decision to turn independent colleges into vocational schools sparked protests across China. Many students felt that this change would undermine the prestige of a university degree and harm their future job prospects, especially as China faced an influx of new graduates. Despite these protests, Xi's government made no significant efforts to address the underlying issues, such as creating job opportunities for the 8 million graduates expected to enter the workforce. In response to these challenges, some disillusioned Chinese youth have begun to turn to the CIA as a way to express their dissatisfaction and seek change. This shift has surprised many, as it highlights the depth of discontent among the youth under Xi's rule. China's government, with its increased focus on security and surveillance, has made it difficult for the US to gather intelligence on the country, especially after the CIA suffered significant losses in the early 2010s due to a breach of its networks. The US has since been working to rebuild its intelligence operations in China. At the same time, the real estate sector, which has been a cornerstone of China's economy, is experiencing a crisis. Property prices have been falling for over a year, with some experts comparing the situation to Japan's real estate crash in the 1990s. The real estate market's collapse has brought China's economy to the brink of disaster, and the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, is scrambling to address the crisis. However, many experts believe that it may be too late for the government to reverse the damage and prevent a prolonged economic slump. The real estate boom in China has been fueled by cultural factors, with homeownership seen as a symbol of social status and security. The government's over-reliance on this sector to drive economic growth has created a dangerous bubble, and now with the market crashing, China faces significant economic challenges. The CCP's efforts to stabilize the situation may not be enough to prevent a prolonged economic downturn, and the consequences of this failure will likely continue to be felt by the youth and the broader population. China's real estate market became a massive speculative bubble fueled by the belief that real estate prices would only rise. People rushed to buy homes, even purchasing properties before construction began. This led to developers selling entire complexes before breaking ground. However, after construction, many apartments sat empty because they had owners but no actual residents. The demand for real estate was driven by people buying multiple properties as investments, hoping to profit from the boom. Real estate was the most accessible investment in China, as other sectors were less developed. Many Chinese families had up to 70% of their wealth tied up in real estate. The sector contributed to around 30% of China's GDP, creating a fragile foundation for the economy. When Evergrande, one of the largest developers in China, faced liquidity issues, it became clear that the real estate market was unsustainable. The company, with over $300 billion in liabilities, had relied on pre-sales to fund land purchases and future developments. However, this practice created a dangerous cycle where developers used money meant for construction to buy more land, leading to a situation where the supply of housing outpaced actual demand. Local governments in China were complicit in this system because they profited from leasing land to developers. The more developers paid for land, the higher the local government's revenue. However, the central government did little to regulate this, as it was benefiting from the bubble. The introduction of the Three Red Lines policy aimed to curb developer debt by restricting loans, but this backfired, as it further limited developers' ability to complete projects, leading to unfinished homes and growing public dissatisfaction. Millions of homes, some of which were pre-sold, remain unfinished, with people still forced to pay mortgages on properties that may never be completed. This situation sparked protests as homeowners demanded their homes or compensation. Despite efforts by the government to stabilize the market, including reducing mortgage rates and down payment requirements, people's confidence in the real estate market waned. Real estate, once considered a safe investment, was now seen as a risky one. The economy suffered as a result, with reduced consumer spending leading to lower business revenues and layoffs, creating a vicious cycle. In an effort to prevent further economic collapse, the government launched Project Whitelist, which allows developers to access new loans to complete stalled projects. However, this has created pressure on banks, which are already struggling with bad debt. The real estate crash is spreading across China's economy, affecting not only developers but also financial institutions and other industries. Real estate represents a much larger portion of China's GDP than it did in other economies like the US in 2008 or Japan in the 1990s, meaning any downturn in this sector has a much larger impact on the overall economy. The current crisis reveals the dangers of over-reliance on a single sector for economic growth. The real estate bubble, once seen as a cornerstone of China's economic success, is now a major liability, threatening both the financial stability of the country and the livelihoods of millions. The question remains whether China can recover from this massive crisis and prevent a deflationary spiral that could worsen the situation even further. China is facing an economic crisis that mirrors Japan's long stagnation, and if not handled carefully, it could lead to a similar fate. To understand the gravity of the situation, it's important to look back at Japan's complex economic crisis in the 1990s. Japan's real estate market was booming before the crash, much like China's was in the early 2000s. In fact, at one point, the land value of Tokyo equaled that of the entire United States. The main driver of this boom was low interest rates, which encouraged massive investment in real estate. However, when the central bank raised rates to cool down the market, it triggered one of the most disastrous economic crashes in Japan's history. People were left owing mortgages on properties that were now worth less than the loan they took out, leading to widespread financial hardship. The crash led to decades of stagnation, and it took Japan over 20 years to recover to pre-crisis stock market levels. Japan's GDP per capita has stagnated, remaining around $40,000 since the 1990s. Now, economists worry that China may face a similar crisis. But in China's case, things may be even worse. Unlike Japan, which was less dependent on real estate, China's economy is heavily reliant on this sector. A crash in China's real estate market could have catastrophic global effects. However, China has the advantage of learning from Japan's experience. If the Chinese government, the CCP, can manage the crisis effectively, it may avoid Japan's prolonged stagnation. But failure could lead to widespread economic hardship, potentially affecting billions of people. Another major concern for China is its growing control over global trade, specifically through its Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. By controlling strategic assets, including ports around the world, China has increased its influence over global trade. As of 2023, China holds stakes in more than 92 ports worldwide. These ports are crucial for global supply chains, with over 80% of trade being carried by sea. Ports are essential for many nations, especially developing countries, as they serve as lifelines for imports and exports. In some regions, countries like Yemen rely heavily on ports for food and other necessities, making their control vital for economic survival. China's strategy of controlling ports involves lending heavily to countries in exchange for stakes in strategic assets, often leading to Chinese ownership of critical infrastructure. One of the most notorious examples of this is Sri Lanka's Hambantota port. Initially, Sri Lanka was unable to fully fund the port project and turned to China for a $1.3 billion loan. However, the port failed to meet expectations and struggled to attract traffic, incurring huge losses. By 2016, Sri Lanka faced mounting debt and had to restructure the port's management, with Chinese entities taking control. China invested $1.12 billion for a majority stake, and Sri Lanka leased the port to China for 99 years, despite still being responsible for the debt. This debt trap has allowed China to gain control over key strategic ports without directly taking on the financial burden. The Hambantota case highlights China's tactics of using debt to acquire influence over other nations. The Sri Lankan government, particularly under former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, was heavily influenced by Chinese interests, with accusations of bribes and political manipulation to secure favorable deals for China. Overall, China's increasing control over critical ports and its growing influence over global trade are concerning, both for the countries involved and for the global economy. As nations realize the risks, some are backing away from Chinese projects, but the impact of China's dominance in these regions remains significant. The Belt and Road Initiative may have long-term consequences, especially if it leads to military and economic control of key regions. The development and subsequent management of Sri Lanka's Hambantota port offers a clear illustration of China's strategic use of debt trap diplomacy. Despite being built in 2010, the port's opening on the birthday of then-President Mahinda Rajapaksa raised suspicions, especially after China Harbor blasted a boulder in the harbor at an extraordinary cost of $40 million. This cost sparked speculations about overcharging and possible kickbacks to Rajapaksa. The situation worsened with the approval of the Matala Rajapaksa International Airport, funded by China's Exim Bank, which faced criticism for mismanagement and wasteful spending, with over $80,000 spent on an extravagant ceremony rather than necessary studies. China's influence extended beyond infrastructure projects. During Sri Lanka's 2015 elections, a government investigation revealed that $7.6 million from the Chinese Port Construction Fund flowed into Rajapaksa's campaign efforts. This included large payments and promotions made just days before the elections. Similarly, China Harbor's previous questionable activities included bribing officials in Bangladesh and being banned from World Bank contracts after engaging in corrupt practices in the Philippines. Rajapaksa's heavy reliance on Chinese loans led to a fragile economy, and although the opposition leader promised to reduce Chinese influence, the damage was already done. In 2017, Sri Lanka was forced to hand over the Hambantota port to China for 99 years as part of a debt restructuring deal, highlighting the vulnerability that debt trap diplomacy creates. China's influence is not confined to Sri Lanka. In Pakistan, China extended its footprint through the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPC). Pakistan, struggling with political instability and economic crisis, turned to China for loans, resulting in Chinese control over critical assets like the Gwadar port. The arrangement is designed to bypass the Malacca Strait choke point, which is crucial for China's energy imports, and provide strategic leverage against regional rivals, especially India. Similar moves have been made across the Indian Ocean region, with Chinese investments in various ports in countries like Bangladesh, Myanmar, and the UAE. The most concerning aspect of China's port strategy is the strategic positioning of these ports, many of which are close to critical global choke points like the Strait of Hormuz. Through these projects, China not only secures its energy supply routes but also bolsters its military and geopolitical influence. For instance, China has military presence at Gwadar and has made strategic agreements with various nations to ensure continued access and control. China's debt trap diplomacy is not confined to Asia. It extends to Africa, Europe, and even the Americas. Chinese investments in ports across these regions have reached billions of dollars, with several European countries like Greece, Ukraine, and Belgium seeing Chinese firms take full control of port operations. In Africa, China's lending model has been linked to resource-backed loans, where repayment is often made in the form of natural resources or control over strategic assets. Despite the high interest rates and short repayment periods offered by Chinese loans, many countries opt for these loans due to the ease of access and the lack of stringent conditions typically imposed by institutions like the IMF. However, this often results in these nations struggling to repay the debt, leading to their strategic assets being handed over to China. As a result, China's influence has grown significantly, particularly in regions that are vital for global trade and military strategy, raising concerns about its long-term intentions. In conclusion, while Chinese loans may seem like an attractive option for struggling nations, they often come with hidden costs in terms of sovereignty and strategic control. China's port strategy, particularly in the Indian Ocean and beyond, serves as a powerful tool to expand its global influence, potentially altering the balance of power in critical regions across the world. The Chinese influence on global ports is a growing concern, especially with their investments in strategic locations. For instance, in Brazil, the port of Panaga handles the third highest traffic volume, with China owning a significant portion of it. Similarly, China's stake in Peru's Chiang Kai port is 60%, raising concerns about the potential risks for these countries. One of the most prominent cases in this regard is the acquisition of Greece's Piraeus port by China's COSCO Shipping Group. Piraeus port, the largest in Greece and the seventh largest in Europe, became a major focal point in 2015 when Greece faced a severe debt crisis. During this time, China seized the opportunity and COSCO acquired a controlling stake in the port. Initially, COSCO secured operating rights in 2008, but the company's influence increased in 2016 when it acquired 51% of the port and later raised this stake to 67% by October 2021. As a result, COSCO has had the majority stake in Piraeus, turning it into a vital gateway for Chinese trade into Europe and the Middle East. The development has led to significant increases in container volumes, which rose almost sevenfold within 10 years. However, the situation isn't as favorable for the workers at the port. Unions have reported worsening working conditions since China's involvement, including accidents, lack of safety training, and insecure employment. Workers have even faced exploitation, working long shifts without breaks in hazardous conditions. Additionally, Chinese workers have replaced many locals in senior positions, and the materials used in port construction often come from China, making the economic benefit to Greece questionable. The strategic importance of Piraeus cannot be overstated. Its proximity to major shipping routes, including the Suez Canal, and its connections to Central and Eastern Europe give China a foothold in Europe. While the Chinese military has previously shown interest by sending naval vessels to the port, the current global environment has shifted. Many countries, including Greece, have become more resistant to China's influence. For example, Greece blocked a Chinese company, China State Grid, from bidding on key power distribution projects in 2021, demonstrating its growing reluctance to allow Chinese dominance. Similarly, Italy has formally exited China's Belt and Road Initiative (BRI) in 2023, marking a significant blow to China's ambitions in Europe. Countries like Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia have also distanced themselves from Chinese influence, with Lithuania even strengthening ties with Taiwan despite China's protests. The trend extends beyond Europe. In Africa, China's influence is waning. Chinese loans to African nations have significantly decreased, and some projects, like Tanzania's bamboo port, have been cancelled or reconsidered. In Asia, Pakistan's Gwadar port, a key project for China, faces opposition from local rebel groups, and its location in the disputed Kashmir region raises concerns about the long-term viability of Chinese investments. In Myanmar, China's planned $7 billion port project was scaled back due to the country's awareness of the potential risks of falling into a Chinese debt trap. Similarly, Samoa canceled a $100 million port development, citing the excessive debt burden. China's influence is also being countered in other regions. In Israel, India has secured control over a significant portion of the Haifa port, while in Sri Lanka, the United States has partnered with India to invest in a port terminal in Colombo, counteracting China's presence. Overall, while China's investments in global ports have brought some economic benefits, the growing resistance from countries, awareness of debt traps, and geopolitical shifts indicate that China's dominance in global infrastructure may be facing significant setbacks. The DFC's investment in Asia, including Adani's $700 million Build-Operate-Transfer (BOT) deal with the Sri Lankan Ports Authority in 2021, highlights the growing importance of India's involvement in the region. This deal aimed at developing and operating the strategic Colombo Port's Western Container Terminal. In addition, India has extended a significant $3.8 billion assistance to Sri Lanka, covering currency swaps, grants, credit lines, humanitarian supplies, and infrastructure development. As a reciprocal gesture, Sri Lanka cancelled Chinese projects in the Jaffna Peninsula, allowed India to invest in its energy sector, and built a free-floating dock facility and a maritime rescue coordination center, one unit of which is to be stationed at China-operated Hambantota port. Similarly, India and Japan have teamed up to counter China's influence in Bangladesh by jointly developing the Matabari port. This deep-sea port will benefit not only Bangladesh, but also improve connectivity between India and Japan. China's economic challenges are deepening, with its stock market facing a severe downturn. The CSI 300, which tracks the value of China's top 300 publicly traded companies, has dropped almost 40% since its peak in 2021, sitting at a 5-year low. China's largest company, Tencent, has seen its stock price fall by 60% in just 3 years, and the total market value of Chinese stocks has shrunk by $6 trillion, more than the GDP of any country except the US and China. While the S&P 500 in the United States is thriving, China's economy is struggling, reflecting badly on the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. Despite GDP figures showing a 5.2% growth in 2023, the stock market signals a different reality, with many experts suggesting the CCP is trying to hide the true extent of the downturn by censoring negative views online. A major factor in this financial crisis is the CCP's control over China's financial institutions. In 2019, over 50% of China's stocks were owned by institutional investors, and this percentage has only grown. However, unlike in Western markets, where these investors operate independently, China's institutional investors are influenced by the CCP, particularly after the establishment of the National Financial Regulatory Administration. The CCP has been pouring capital into the stock market to prop up stock prices, and institutions are forced to align their investments with the CCP's political goals, avoiding sales of stocks that could hurt China's image. Despite these efforts, the stock market is still in a freefall as domestic and foreign investors are pulling out. Companies are seeing reduced revenues and profits, and many are struggling to maintain stock prices artificially. As the CCP continues to clamp down on banks and investors, cracking down on practices like short selling, the underlying economic conditions remain bleak. This is due to declining consumer spending, with China facing deflation, a situation not seen since the 2008 global financial crisis. While inflation causes prices to rise, deflation leads to declining prices, which discourages consumers from spending, leading to a slowdown in economic activity. Compounding the situation is China's massive debt problem, with a debt-to-GDP ratio of 280%, much higher than the US's 120%. Local governments and state-owned enterprises are responsible for much of this debt, including the creation of local government financing vehicles, LGFVs, which have accumulated trillions in liabilities. Many of these LGFVs are struggling to repay their loans, and a significant portion of China's corporate debt is tied up in these non-performing loans. The collapse of the real estate market has exacerbated this crisis, with developers like Evergrande and Country Garden unable to repay their debts, threatening further instability in the financial sector. The CCP has attempted to restructure debt and provide financial support to struggling developers, but these measures may be too little, too late. The credit-based growth model that fueled China's rapid development is now showing signs of collapse, as bad loans and a shrinking pool of available credit slow down investment in productive businesses. This is leading to a vicious cycle of deflation, reduced lending, and a shrinking economy. Investors are increasingly losing confidence in the future growth of Chinese companies, as evidenced by the declining price-to-earnings ratios in the stock market. All these factors indicate that China's economic experiment may be nearing its end, and the once thriving Chinese stock market could be heading for a long-term downturn. With a heavy reliance on debt and a fragile financial system, it remains to be seen how China will navigate this economic crisis in the coming years. The The Chinese stock market has seen a significant decline, reflecting a loss of confidence in the country's economic future. The market has dropped by over 50%, signaling a shift in expectations about growth and stability. A key indicator of this is the price-to-book P/B ratio, which compares a company's market value to its book value. In the US, companies are valued at 4 to 5 times their book value, suggesting optimism about future growth. In China, however, the P/B ratio has fallen to 1.7, a 5-year low, indicating skepticism about the country's economic prospects. Foreign investment, once a key driver of China's economic boom, has also reversed. Foreign direct investment peaked at over $300 billion in 2021, but the country now faces its first outflow of capital in 25 years. In the third quarter of 2023, the outflow reached $11.8 billion, with over $2 billion leaving the stock market alone. This marks the longest and most significant outflow of foreign capital since 2014. While the debt deflation spiral is a major reason for this loss of confidence, geopolitical tensions, especially with the United States, have also played a significant role. The US and China are engaged in an ongoing economic and technological rivalry. Starting with the Trump administration, the US imposed tariffs and sanctions on Chinese companies, citing concerns over the trade deficit and national security. The Biden administration has continued these policies, further restricting China's access to advanced technology, particularly chips used in artificial intelligence, AI. China's own chip companies are far behind Western counterparts, which hinders its technological progress. There are also growing fears that China may take military action against Taiwan, which would likely exacerbate tensions with the US and its allies, possibly leading to further economic isolation. Many companies are already diversifying out of China, as seen with Apple's new manufacturing plant in India. These geopolitical shifts are eroding China's position as the world's manufacturing powerhouse and contributing to the overall decline in confidence in its economy. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, under Xi Jinping, has increasingly moved away from market reforms, which were initiated in the late 20th century to drive economic growth. Xi has sought to centralize power and curb the influence of the private sector, seeing it as a potential threat to CCP control. This has led to growing uncertainty among investors and businesses in China. The CCP's tightening grip on the economy may provide Xi with more control, but it could also deepen the economic crisis. The stock market collapse is both a threat and an opportunity for Xi Jinping. If he uses the crisis to justify a return to a more centralized economy, he may gain further power, but he also risks losing support as the public becomes disillusioned with the lack of economic growth. On a separate note, a scandal has recently emerged in New York, involving Linda Sun, a former aide to Governors Kathy Hochul and Andrew Cuomo, who has been charged with acting as a Chinese agent. Sun allegedly used her position to advance Chinese interests, including blocking meetings with Taiwanese officials and pushing the Chinese government's agenda. She faces multiple charges, including violating the Foreign Agents Registration Act, money laundering, and visa fraud. Sun and her husband allegedly laundered millions of dollars and used the proceeds to buy expensive properties. This case has raised concerns about Chinese influence in U.S. politics, particularly with the upcoming U.S. elections. It highlights the methods China may use to infiltrate political systems, both through direct influence and more covert means, such as espionage and the establishment of secret police stations overseas. In conclusion, both China's economic troubles and the emerging political scandals are reshaping global perceptions of the country. The loss of confidence in China's future, coupled with its increasing geopolitical risks, is likely to have long-term consequences for its economy and international relations. The establishment of Chinatown stations has raised significant concerns, as these offices are reportedly used to intimidate and harass fugitives and critics of the Chinese government. These offices have spread across North America and Europe, with reports suggesting that they are employed by the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, to monitor individuals critical of the People's Republic of China, PRC. Despite these allegations, China has denied any wrongdoing, claiming that the international police stations exist to provide services to Chinese citizens. However, incidents involving figures such as Linda Sun, Jerry Chun-Ching Liu, and Harry Luan Wang have exposed a broader Chinese espionage network operating globally. Recently, a Chinese spy named Alice Gu was arrested in Indonesia after fleeing for weeks, further highlighting the extent of Chinese surveillance and intelligence operations abroad. This situation underscores the growing diplomatic tensions that China faces, particularly with the United States. These events risk undoing years of efforts to foster trust, with Chinese officials likely to encounter increasing scrutiny and hostility. Diplomatic protocols may be revisited, and stricter foreign agent registration laws could be enforced. The rise of these spy operations shows how espionage can undermine diplomatic relations, especially when conducted covertly. The United States, and the world at large, must recognize this threat and reassess their approach to Chinese influence and espionage. One individual who exemplifies the delicate relationship between entrepreneurship and the Chinese government is Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba. Ma's journey from a modest background to becoming China's richest man and a global icon is a testament to China's rapid economic transformation. However, his outspoken criticism of China's financial regulations in 2020 led to a significant backlash from the CCP. After publicly challenging the Chinese financial system at the Bund Financial Summit, Ma found himself at odds with President Xi Jinping's government. His comments were seen as an attempt to undermine the CCP's authority, which led to a series of retaliatory actions. Ma's empire, once a symbol of China's booming tech sector, began to crumble under government scrutiny. The CCP canceled the highly anticipated IPO of Ma's fintech company, Ant Group, and imposed a record fine on Alibaba for antitrust violations. Key services were stripped away from his businesses, and Ma's personal wealth dwindled. His public persona, once larger than life, vanished as he disappeared from the public eye for months. When he resurfaced, he appeared in muted, controlled settings, signaling a shift in his role within China's economic landscape. In the wake of his downfall, Ma has pivoted away from the tech world and focused on sectors such as agriculture and education, aligning himself more closely with the CCP's strategic priorities. This move was not just about finding a new business venture, it was also about maintaining influence while keeping a low profile in a politically charged environment. Alibaba, too, underwent a significant restructuring, splitting into 6 business units to adapt to the increasingly competitive and regulated market. Ma has publicly supported this transformation, emphasizing the need for the company to stay ahead of the curve, particularly with the rise of artificial intelligence. Ma's story reflects a broader trend in China's tech industry, where growing influence is increasingly viewed with suspicion by the government. The CCP's crackdown on billionaires and major tech companies is part of a larger effort to reinforce state control over the economy. For Ma, this shift represents a deliberate attempt to rebuild his public image and maintain relevance in a rapidly changing political and economic landscape. By investing in sectors aligned with national priorities, he is positioning himself for long-term success, albeit in a vastly different role than the one he once held as a tech mogul.